parade.
We're here at the Dallas Fantasy Fair talking with Joe Kubert, comic book artist and cartoonist. We certainly appreciate you spending a few minutes of your valuable time with us this morning.
My pleasure.
And what we want to do is get a little quick biography. Tell us about your involvement in comics, and I want you to start off at the earliest time, what you described as prenatal time.
Well, I was fortunate enough to get into this business at a young age, and I think that probably one of the main reasons for my being able to do that was not so much as a result of any innate talent, but the fact that there was a really dire need for people to fill up 64 pages of comic book material. And at a young and tender age, I guess I was about 12 or something thereabouts, just prior to my getting into high school, I had always had this desire. I've been drawing since I was 3 or 4 years old. I'd always had this desire to do muscle, super strong, adventurous kind of drawings, and it was just a natural progression to try to get into what was just starting out at that time, which was comic books.
That's hard for a lot of people to understand, that there weren't any comics per se for you to look at, or were there?
Oh yes, there were. I recall very distinctly the first Superman book that came out. I can even remember the smell of that magazine. It was just fantastic, and I say that very complimentarily, not in a derogatory manner. But it was very exciting. In fact, I recall very vividly the first Superman book done by Siegel and Schuster, and the coarse kind of rough material in it even made it more exciting than it would have been otherwise, I think. So yeah, comic books were around when I came in.
Where were you at this time?
I was living in Brooklyn. I was just coming out of what we call junior high school, entering into high school, and inadvertently I met a schoolmate of mine whose relative uncle was, I think, John Goldwater, one of the owners of what eventually became the Archie comics. It was called MLJ at that time. And he said, "Joe, you draw stuff like they're putting out in comic books now. Why don't you do something there? Maybe they'll pay you money for it." And I did a page of drawings and brought it up to MLJ, and I was fortunate enough at that time, I think I was about 11 or 12, I was fortunate enough to meet some really terrific people like Mort Meskin and Charlie Biro and Irv Novick, and they were very kind and very outgoing to me and helped me with my drawings and showed me the direction to go, showed me the materials to use, and that's the way it all started.
And you worked on, I guess, some speculative stories, or did you walk in and say, "Hey, I'd like to work in comics"?
I didn't know what it took to get a job in comics. All I knew was that this was the kind of drawing that was exciting to me, and this is what I wanted to do. I brought in a page of muscle guys, I guess. And in fact, one of my first jobs was inking in on Bob Montana's Archie, which he started at that time. I think he even snuck my name into one of the first early strips as one of the sub-characters. I was able to, at that time, do perhaps work on the original Shield that was being done by Irv Novick. And as I said, not because I had any great talent or showed any really good stuff. It was very, very bad, as a matter of fact. But they had a whole bunch of pages that had to be turned out every month, 64-page magazine.
Well, it's a lot different from now when
Yeah.
you get 20 pages. And there were many characters and many different stories.
Yeah. And well, I was just lucky.
Well, what was your first assignment that you recall as saying, "Hey, this is something they really want me to do as a job"?
Well, the first printed job that I did that I can recall, I think I was maybe about 13 or 14 at the time, and the name of the strip was a 6-page story called Volton, Volton, and it was done for a man named Timerson, Holyoke Publishing Company, which is, of course, extinct a long time, back in the Stone Age. I did a 6-page story, and they paid me $5 a page, which is what I should have paid them. They should never have paid me, but they did that, and it was a great learning experience for me. And that's the way I got into the business, is by doing a whole bunch of stuff which allowed me to learn what this whole thing was about.
Well, that's an interesting comment I've heard from you on several times, and in a couple of interviews I've read with you, is that you weren't a particular fan of your early stuff. When did you become comfortable with your drawing style?
I don't think that any artist, and George Pratt, who is present with us here, would, I think, testify to that. No artist that I know of is really ever completely satisfied with his work. But the stuff that I did 30, 40, and 50 years ago hurts my eyes. I mean, it's really, really bad stuff. We attempt with every piece of work that we do, me and anybody else who's working on this stuff, to make the next one better than the one we've just finished. You're satisfied perhaps 10 minutes after you've done the work. You look it over and say, well, I could have done better here, I could have improved it there. And I think that's part of the excitement of doing drawing in the first place. It's the challenge every time you sit down with an empty piece of paper.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but during the 50s and 60s, you did long stints with major characters, with the major houses. Anything stick in your mind as with a particular fondness?
I've always kind of prided myself on the fact that I was involved as best I could be and as deeply as I could be with every strip I was doing. I've been looked at as, I guess by the reading population of comic books, as the war cartoonist. Well, it's not because I have any particular affection for that kind of subject matter, but that was a job that I was doing, and at that particular time, and it seemed to take off pretty well. And so what I would do with that strip, as I have with everything else that I've done, do as much research, get it as effective as I can, simply because that's the job I was doing. I had no particular affection or affinity with that work, but I did it the best I knew how, as I've tried with Tarzan, which I did have a liking for. Enemy Ace I liked, but not all that much. I don't have that kind of feeling about war stuff.
But you worked for a long time on Sergeant Rock.
Yep, about 30 years.
So most people would recognize, especially in the reprint editions they're doing now,
Yeah,
as your Sergeant Rock is probably known as the definitive Sergeant Rock.
Well, I guess that's probably because I did most of the earliest work. I think there was only maybe one or two other artists who had done, one other artist that I know of that had done that particular character before I started doing it. Ross Andrew, I think, is the artist that did the very, very first Rock story that Bob Kanigher wrote. I think that sort of definition, that sort of recognition, I think is probably in effect with any artist who has started a strip. It's not that somebody is better or worse. They're just different than what's been done before, that's all.
When we're talking about different things, how do you apply that to your sons, Andy and Adam, coming up?
Thank you very much for that question. I have a great deal of pride when it comes to the work that my son is doing, plus the fact that I think it's nothing short of a miracle, because nobody could really do the kind of work we do unless they really have something inside of them that pushes them to do it. Our work is the kind of stuff that nobody can tout you onto, but if you really want to do it, nobody can tout you off of it either. The fact that two of my sons have decided to do this kind of work and really love it as much as I do is nothing short of a miracle. And the stuff that they're doing is pride-busting stuff. It's just great.
They went through your art school, I'm going to assume?
Yeah, and they had a really rough time because they were in my classes. Now, if somebody else in the class didn't do their homework for that day, well, they can give me some sort of a reason, an explanation, and I'd accept it. They couldn't do that. They really had to toe the line, and they worked real hard when they got through the school, when they went through the school.
And one last question I want to ask you about the different instructors you have at your school. Yeah. Especially George Pratt, that you have a great deal of pride in.
Right. George Pratt, I think, is a perfect example of the caliber of instructor we have. I have 30-plus instructors at the school for something around 300 students who are attending, full-time and part-time students. And the criteria for anybody teaching in the school is that they must be a contemporarily working cartoonist working at that particular job about which they're teaching at the school. There are people like Erwin Hazen, who is teaching at the school, Tex Blaisdell. I've had guys like Al Williamson and Dick Giordano taught at the school a good number of years before he became vice president up at D.C. It has been the reason for the success of the students coming out of the school is, of course, number one, primarily because of their dedication to what they want to do. But easily as important is the caliber of the instructor who's teaching there. They're a bunch of really terrific guys, and George I think, epitomizes that kind of guy.
Joe Kubert, we certainly appreciate you spending your time with us.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Before we have George sit down, Joe, can we get you to do an anniversary reading for us? We have an anniversary program coming up.
How do I do that?
Well, the name of our show is The Comic Book Show. So you'd say, I'm Joe Kubert, and then I guess a slug line of how you'd like to best be, acknowledged, and say, I'd like to wish the Comic Book Show a happy anniversary, or a
And the
happy
name of
birthday.
that show is
The Comic Book Show.
The Comic Book Show. Let's check your shot, Kevin, and then we'll.
Yeah, just right into this camera.
Somebody in the shadows, you don't need to step away. Right. Just kind of lean over now. Give the microphone.
Oh, I guess that would be helpful, wouldn't it?
Okay, we're clear, we're ready to go.
This is Joe Kubert, comic book artist, cartoonist, wishing the Comic Book Show a happy, healthy, and fruitful anniversary.
Very nice. Let's check our time now. I have 10:30. Are we still?
I'm good. I got till 11 o'clock.
Okay. Well, let's get.
I'm going to stick around till George gets
Okay,
up. 'cause I
let's
wanna
get George in the
I want
chair.
to tickle his feet as he